So, you think you might be a 2 on the Enneagram, but you still have questions and you want to go deeper. My goal for this video is to provide you a high-level overview of 3 things, starting with the Type 2's core motivations, fears, and desires. Then moving into a checklist to double check or validate if you are in fact a Type 2. From there, we'll touch on a cheat sheet, as I call it, of how a Type 2 shows up in the world. And then I'll close out with, so now what? Where do I go now that I know I'm a Type 2 or might still be questioning what I am? So the most important thing for you to walk away with from this video is understanding that the Enneagram is different from other personality tools because it looks at a person's core motivation. It's not just looking at an individual's behaviors. So, for example, a behavior might be when someone goes and offers to walk their neighbor's dog or get their mail for them. Those are behaviors that we can observe. What we don't know is why did that person offer to walk their neighbor's dog or get their mail for them? It's almost as though you imagine the human personality like an iceberg. And at the tip of the iceberg, what we see are people's behaviors. Underneath the surface, the big part of the iceberg, are a person's motivators, their fears, their defense mechanisms, the things that we can't observe. But when we understand why someone does what they do, it allows us to better understand and empathize with them. But before we get into even using the tool to empathize and understand others, it's so important to start with understanding yourself. And the Enneagram is not here to put you in a box. Unfortunately, we are actually already in a box of our own personality. And the Enneagram is helping us get out of that box by showing us what our default programming is so that we don't always have to default to walking our neighbor's dog or getting their mail for them if we don't really want to. I am very excited about this episode because I myself am a Type 2, so we'll bring to life a little bit of my own experience throughout this video. So with that, let's get into the Type 2 motivators, starting with the motivation for a Type 2 is being loved, needed, or even indispensable because there's such desire to be connected to others. The fear is that if I am not loved or needed or indispensable, that means I'm unworthy or unlovable and could cause rejection, which is a deep, deep fear for a Type 2. The desire is to feel loved and appreciated by the important people in our lives. 2s don't need to be loved by everyone. We just don't want to be disliked by anyone. And it's an important distinction because it's so much more for the Type 2 about the important people in our lives versus everyone being influenced by us. Beatrice Chestnut uses this title for the 2, the strategic helper, or other times I've heard it as the befriender. I like those because I think they draw to light how the Type 2 leverages these motivators. It's not just giving or it's not just helping to help. There's something else tied to it. If I'm helpful, then I can't be rejected. If I am pleasant and nice, then you will like me and want me to be around, and that will fill my desire to be loved. And that is so much more the essence of a Type 2 and their motivators. So if you've been wondering if you are a Type 2 and that's all connecting with you, there's a very good chance that this is your dominant type. But let's take it deeper by looking at the checklist for a Type 2. So you might be a Type 2 if you feel good when you're helping or supporting others. You instinctively sense people's needs and want to meet them. You struggle to express your own needs and desires. You crave appreciation and validation for your efforts. You sometimes overextend yourself trying to please others. You will do anything to avoid being rejected. You form deep personal connections quickly. You easily get along and connect with all different types of people. You take pride in being seen as generous and caring, and you worry about being perceived as selfish. Now, again, if you checked each one of these, there's a good chance you're a type 2, but it has to always go back to that core motivator. I know for me in my own life, when I was first engaging with the Enneagram, I didn't know if I was a type 2 or not because I didn't really think that I was that helpful of a person. I, I thought, well, having influence or winning others over was more important to me. And it was more about that reflection around why am I doing those things, though? And ultimately, for a type 2, why they're doing those things is to be loved, to have their true self mirrored back to them. Twos will naturally sense on what people want, but can have a really hard time expressing what they want. The reason twos can be really helpful for others is so that they don't have to express their needs. Twos can fall into a thought pattern of, if I'm helpful, if I'm doing these things for others, then they will want to reciprocate it. They will want to take care of my needs in return, which doesn't always happen. And it's not fair to always do to the other person because they might not know what your needs are. And you have to learn how to express them, which is really hard for a type 2. And I know I have to work on constantly, even in my own life. But what does that look like for a type 2 and how they show up in the world? Well, twos are very relationship focused. I say it all the time. I've never met a stranger. I mean, I will sit down on the airplane and I'm so sorry. I am that person that will talk to you. They tend to be people, but not always. That's still a behavior that we're looking at. I've also met twos who don't want to have to talk to everyone on the plane because it can be the one time in their life that they can turn off and not need to take care of those around them. But their communication style is warm and empathetic. Twos tend to be people pleasing individuals. When it comes to making a decision, they will prioritize others. They are very considerate. They lead with empathy. They want the team to work cohesively. The blind spots become they can be over involved. They can think they know someone's needs better than that individual. They will want to take care of people, even if they didn't ask. They can also neglect their own needs and their own self. The very first job that I had right out of college, I was traveling on 250 flights a year and was barely eating, barely sleeping. I had been on site and passed out in 2 different client offices that I was visiting because I had completely neglected to take care of myself and had prioritized how my boss viewed me and my company and wanted them to think that I was so good at what I did and so important that I neglected my own self. The pet peeve for a 2, which is don't do this to a type 2, is don't make them feel unappreciated. It means so much to a type 2 to get a thank you for what they've done. Now, the challenge with being a type 2 comes down to balancing personal needs with their own needs and others' needs, balancing personal and others' needs so that they don't just take care of others. The way that they are seen by everyone else is selfless and caring and compassionate. And this really makes up that DNA of a type 2. As you see on the right-hand side there, you have the type 2 with the 4 different numbers. And I'm not going to get in depth in this video because we're just keeping it high level, but will in future videos touch on the interaction of all these different types. The type 2 goes to an 8 and a 4. They have access to both of those arrows. It's called arrow work that they can do. And then they have a 3 and a 1 wing. And when they access them, it can help them again get out of that box of their own personality. What this looks like even in my own life, I use that example of walking your neighbor's dog. I remember when I first moved into the home I live in right now, I was meeting my neighbor and they had two dogs. And my type 2 personality that wanted to take the wheel, wanted to instinctively offer up to them, what do you think? To walk their dog. If you're out of town or you need someone, give me a call. But I paused because I thought, do I really want to, upon meeting this individual for the very first time in my life, offer to walk their dog for them? Is that a commitment that I want to make? Fortunately, I'd been doing some Enneagram work for about 13 years at the time and thought, you know what? I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait before I offer this up, because the reason I would offer it up the first time I met them would be to get them to like me, to think highly of me. And that would have been the motivator. It wouldn't have been taking care of myself. Now, fast forward a couple years, and I would happily walk my neighbor's dog, and they're delightful people, but it's coming from a healthy place. And that's a good example for a type 2 of how you can leverage the Enneagram to get out of this box of always needing to offer yourself up to others and help everyone else at the cost of your own needs. So now what? You think, all right, everything you said, Hannah, resonates with me, and I believe I am a type 2. So where do I go from here? Well, start with studying more. The wonderful thing about the Enneagram is it's a lifelong journey. I've been studying it for 13 years, over 13 years now, and I'm continually learning more. Great resources are Beatrice Chestnut's book, The Complete Enneagram. Also, Personality Traits Using the Enneagram for Self-Discovery by Don Riso and Richard Hudson is another really good book. If you're a podcast person, Enneagram 2.0, Enneagram IRL in real life, Typology are great resources. The Enneagram Institute, CP Enneagram Academy, again, wonderful resources that you can go to dive deeper. From here, you're going to want to explore. Now that you know your dominant type, your home type, home base, where you are always going to go back to, next is to look at subtypes. I feel so passionate about subtypes. It is so helpful. It paints your personality in such a bigger picture of knowing whether you're a self-preservation 2, a social 2, a one-to-one 2. From there, dive into the centers of intelligence, understanding the heart center and how that influences your personality. And then looking at your arrow work. As I just showed on that previous page, you have an ability to access 4 different types in very prescriptive ways. Start to look at that arrow work. And then lastly, one of my favorite things, which is the practice of self-observation. Now, what this is you get to observe your behaviors with no judgment. So let's say you are driving your car and someone cuts you off and you're mad, you're angry. Why did they do that? Pause and reflect. What triggered that? Someone was short with you and you didn't really care. Why didn't you care that that person was short with you? Why didn't I say something or speak up in that moment? No judgment. Observe your behaviors in the moment when it happens. And you'll start to see some of these unconscious tendencies and patterns bubble up. Because once we know what our dominant type is and where we default to, we can start to get out of that box. So if you're a type 2, to all my other fellow 2s out there, I am with you. I am here on this journey with you. Even now, I'm putting my hands over my heart because I feel everything you're going through. And just push back on if you do hear stereotypes around how type 2s are all these altruistic, loving, the woman that shows up and always has a casserole for everyone. That's not always the case. Twos can be very powerful and very influential, and are much more strategic in how they go about leveraging helping others. Hopefully, this video was helpful to you on your own journey, and I look forward to you listening to more in the future. Thank you so much.